guys, we are on week 3 of our read-along right now, which I'm really excited about. I have a little bit of a confession to make though. I am filming this way earlier than I normally do because I have actually already read all of the chapters for this week, and I loved them and I want to be able to start reading the next batch, but I like to do things in this order that I read our chapters for the week, I come up with the prompts, and then I record the video so it's kind of fresh with my thoughts on those chapters before I continue on. So that's my little confession of this week. But I'm super excited to talk about these chapters because they just completely sucked me in. Normally I've been reading just a chapter at a time. I think I've already told you guys that I've been listening to the audio while reading along. A lot of days it's while I'm on the treadmill in the morning, and some days it's when I'm in bed. But for these 5 chapters, I think I actually did 3 chapters in one go, so that was definitely a treadmill day, and then I did the other 2 the next day. So I'm very ahead of schedule, and I'm very, very excited to chat with you about these. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts as well. Alright, so our first prompt for this week isn't as much of a discussion point as some of the other ones that I normally pick, but I had to pick this one because I just thought it was such a beautiful way to start the chapter. So this one, this whole section actually started with this quote. "A new chapter in a novel is something like a new scene in a play." So just that alone, that's gorgeous. Like, this writing is amazing. But what she says to you, and when I draw up the curtain this time, reader, you must fancy you see a room in the George Inn at Millcote, with such large figured papering on the wall as inn rooms have, such a carpet, such furniture, such ornaments on the mantelpiece, etc., etc. So I just really thought it was a beautiful way for this section to start, and that's why I wanted to choose this. And that may or may not be part of my motivation for actually changing up my setting for all of you this week. I actually have my garden, my vegetable garden, behind me, all around me actually, on all sides. So I kind of mixed it up a little bit this week too, instead of having my library behind me. So if you're a gardener too, let me know. Okay, so this next passage is when we start to see a turning point, or really a growth in Jane. So she decides she kind of wants to get out of the house. She's really happy at this placement. She really likes her pupils. She really likes the people she's working with. But she decides that she wants to kind of mix things up a little bit. So she feels like she wants to see what else the world has to offer for her. So in the text it says, I desired more of practical experience than I possessed, more of intercourse with my kind, of acquaintance with variety of character than was here within my reach. So she kind of goes on to feel maybe a little bit guilty that she feels this way, or maybe to think that some might think that this isn't an appropriate thing for her to feel, but at the same time she's saying, you know, she's not really having experience with folks her own age. Her main counterpart is an older woman who lost her husband. So, and then her pupil, of course, is much younger. So she's not really having anyone that's a true peer for her. So this is kind of what she's saying. She decides, you know what, I'm gonna just go out in town. I'm gonna mail these letters. And that's what starts this kind of turning point in this week's section. Alright, so our next passage is actually really short, but it felt really meaningful to me. So it's just, the ground was hard, the air was still, my road was lonely. I just feel like this is kind of a bit of a metaphor for what Jane is experiencing in life. Like, in life, her road has been hard. The hand she's been dealt has been a bit difficult, but then and it's also been lonely, right? So she's orphaned, she kind of had these experiences that were less than ideal throughout. So just kind of At this point, if I would sum up everything that's happened to her in a sentence, it would be this one. So that's why I decided to add this in this week as well. Let me know if you had the same impression when you read that. Okay, so our next passage I just completely adored, and even though it didn't necessarily fit into our discussions as much as some of the other ones that I bookmarked that we're not even getting to, I really wanted to include this one. So this is at the point that Jane is showing her portfolio of her paintings, and we're looking at them, and she's being asked like, oh, you must have spent a long time on these, and she explains that she worked on them when she was a teacher and during her breaks or her vacation time. And then Mr. Rochester is asking, were you happy when you painted these? And she says, I was absorbed, sir. Yes, I was happy. To paint them, in short, was to enjoy one of the keenest pleasures I have ever known. Oh, goodness, I loved that. So I'm not a painter or anything of the sort. I personally cross-stitch and knit and crochet, and I'm pretty passionate about those things, but just kind of this artist mind that we were exposed to in that instant with Jane, I really loved seeing. And I know that up until that point we knew that she was a skilled painter, and that kind of was one of the things shown to us when she was leaving school. Her painting was over the mantelpiece and that sort of thing, but we didn't actually get to understand how she felt about it until this moment, and I really loved it. So let me know what you think too. Alright, so I didn't actually explicitly talk about this one major thing that happened, so I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit and go into that. But so the day that Jane went out to mail the letter, she ends up coming across Mr. Rochester as he is coming into the house. He ends up getting into a bit of an accident on the horse and falling and twisting his ankle and spraining it. So she doesn't know who he is at this point. She helps him up and she's caring for him, and later on she gets home from running her errands and she actually sees him at the house, sees his Newfoundland Pilot, and she's like, wait a second, why is he here, what's going on? And then she realizes that it's in fact the benefactor of her position in the house and whatnot. So that's kind of what happened prior. She starts spending a little bit of time with him, not so often, but it is occurring. And as they're spending time together, they're starting, or rather he's starting to confide in her a bit. He does mention throughout that she's more of a listener, but he's starting to kind of express that he feels that he might not be that good of a person, and this weighs on him. And so Jane says back to him, it seems to me that if you tried hard, you would in time find it possible to become what you yourself would approve, and that if from this day you began with resolution to correct your thoughts and actions, you would in a few years have laid up a new and stainless store of recollections to which you might revert with pleasure. So I loved this. This is really Jane's way of saying it's never too late. It's never too late to change who you are. It's never too late to become a better person, or to become a person that you would be proud of. Not to completely digress outside of the book, but I've been thinking a lot, and it's been weighing a lot on me, how we're behaving during this pandemic. And I really feel like we have the option that we can come out of this better or worse, and I know that there's a lot of factors going on, but are we doing things to try to better ourselves during this time? And I know we're all kind of cooped up at home, and of course I'm not speaking to the people that are actually sick right now, but are we trying to exercise? Are we trying to eat well? Are we trying to focus on our mental health? Are we trying to focus on our, maybe working towards that promotion at work, or whatever the case may be? Or are we just kind of just not doing those things? So I just this made me think of that a little bit too. Like, if you start being a person that you think you'd be proud of when you look back in time, you can point to today and that's that moment. And that's basically what Jane is giving to Mr. Rochester as well. Okay, so this one is a doozy because I only gave one quote as the prompt, but I have a couple more that I wanted to share as well, and I couldn't decide between them, and ultimately they all kind of surround the same topic, so I just decided I would handle it this way by adding a few bonus passages in when I answered the question. So the passage I actually included as the prompt was, so Mr. Rochester is talking to Jane, and he says, but in time, I think you will learn to be natural with me, as I find it impossible to be conventional with you. I just really liked this. Mr. Rochester seems like he kind of always has his faculties to him. He's always very assertive. He's used to being in charge. He's used to being in control of these situations. And then the more time he spends around Jane, the more he's opening up and confiding things in her that he's never told another person. And so this is his way of saying, you know, like, I'm not my normal self around you, and maybe in time you'll find the same to be true for me. And I just think that's beautiful, and I loved it. So in addition, a couple other things to share as well. So now Jane is talking to us, the reader, and she says, and was Mr. Rochester now ugly in my eyes? No, reader. Gratitude and many associations, all pleasurable and genial, made his face the object I'd best like to see. His presence in a room was more cheering than the brightest fire. Yet I had not forgotten his faults. Indeed, I could not, for he brought them frequently before me. Oh my gosh, so his face, the object she'd best like to see. Oh my goodness, what is happening here? I really loved that. And then quite possibly my favorite quote of the current discussion was Jane is starting to wonder if he's going to be going away and for how long. He has already previously mentioned he doesn't really like to stick around for too long, and she's wondering to herself, suppose he should be absent spring, summer, and autumn, how joyless sunshine and fine days will seem. Okay, so I mean, I can speak to this sort of a little bit from personal experience. I'm normally someone that is on the road every week for my job, and through my relationship with my husband, the same has been true for him, that he travels a lot. So we go through these phases that we're completely apart from each other, except for like a day on the weekend. And that can obviously be really difficult. So that passage of her just saying, basically like, a beautiful summer day isn't going to be as sweet if she doesn't get to see this man. I was like, wow, that's some serious stuff going on. And I really love the way that we're being exposed to this relationship slowly. All right, so switching gears a little bit, during the time period where Jane is walking around with Mr. Rochester and learning about his life and what's brought him here and why he maybe doesn't think he's the best person, part of that we also learn about his relationship with Adele. So, and this is of course Jane's people. So, he is the presumed father based on this woman that he loved, who seemingly took advantage of him for his wealth. So we now are having this whole conversation where he's basically saying that he doesn't really identify with her as being his daughter, and he's saying to Jane, oh, I'm sure you're going to hold all of this against Adele at this point. And Jane answers back, no, Adele is not answerable for either her mother's faults or yours. So loved that. Like, he doesn't know yet who he's talking to. He doesn't realize that not only has Jane had this, you know, stressful upbringing of being orphaned, but then she also has the situation where she, you know, lives with her aunt who doesn't even want her there, blames her on things that her cousin did. So she's kind of used to the wrong person getting the blame in a situation. just saying, no, I'm not going to hold a single thing against her. You know, she's my pupil, she's great, and I like that she said anything, her mother or you. So she's throwing it in like, yeah, this is your fault too. Like you're not owning up for her being your daughter, even though you're financially supporting her, but not really doing anything beyond that. So that I think was a really big, important quote as well. And he actually goes on, nothing else that has being would have been tolerable to me in the character of creditor for such an obligation, but you, it is different. I feel your benefits no burden, Jane. So it's just this really interesting moment because the dynamic is shifting even more now. She's now saved his life, but now we also have a mystery on our hands. Maybe that's the point of this book. So who tried to harm him? I don't know. So I'm not sure if it's going to be like a long drawn out type of thing for us to figure that out, or if we'll just find out in our next chapter. But that's it for our discussion for chapters 11 through 15. I can't wait to hear what you all think as well, and I'm going to sneak in some additional reading to read ahead a little bit, I think. All right, well, it was great chatting with you. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. Have a good week.